My sister forged my documents and tried to empty my savings account. My parents still blamed me instead of her. My parents secretly pushed my sister into forging paperwork and emptying my bank account after I refused to cover her $52,000 debt. When I stood my ground, they even threatened to sue me for abandoning the family. Instead of giving in, I secured every one of my financial accounts, contacted my attorney, and decided to let the loan shark she had borrowed from deal with the consequences themselves. I'm writing this because I honestly need somewhere to let it all out. After everything that has happened, I'm still struggling to wrap my head around the unbelievable nerve these people had, and every time I think about it, my blood starts boiling all over again. I'm a 34-year-old man, and anyone who truly knows me will tell you that I've been supporting myself since I was 19 years old. I worked brutal overnight shifts to pay every dollar of my college tuition, fought my way through the ranks in the tech industry, and never once asked my parents for financial help. Not a single penny. Somehow, though, my family sees that independence very differently. In their minds, earning my own money doesn't mean I deserve peace or freedom. Instead, they treat me like the family's personal ATM and the automatic solution whenever someone creates another disaster they refuse to take responsibility for. Everything kicked off on what should have been an ordinary Tuesday morning. I was standing in my kitchen making coffee while getting ready for an important quarterly review at work when my phone started vibrating on the counter. The screen showed one name: Mom. My mother, Denise, never calls just to catch up. She's not the type to ask how work is going, what I had for lunch, or whether I'm doing okay. Whenever Denise picks up the phone to call me, it's because someone's world is falling apart. Someone has made a spectacular mess, and she expects me to rush in and clean it up immediately. The second I saw her name, my stomach tightened into a knot. Before I even answered, I knew whatever was coming wasn't going to be good. Still, I took a deep breath, swiped to answer, and prepared myself for yet another family emergency. As soon as I picked up, she surprised me by making painfully awkward small talk, something she never does. "Hey, Damien, honey. How's work? Still doing that tech finance job?" she asked, forcing a sugary, sweet tone that instantly made every warning bell in my head start ringing. She hadn't shown the slightest interest in what I actually did for a living in years, and I seriously doubted she'd ever understood my job in the first place. I could already feel that familiar wave of dread settling in because I knew exactly where this conversation was headed. Even so, curiosity got the better of me, so I decided to play along. "Yeah, Mom, same job as always. What's going on? Why are you calling me this early?" Without missing a beat, her voice changed completely. The fake sweetness disappeared, replaced by something cold and serious. "Your sister is in serious trouble, Damien. We need your help." I wish I could tell you I was shocked or immediately worried, but the truth is I wasn't. My sister Vanessa is 26 years old, and creating complete chaos has practically become her full-time hobby. For years, she's left destruction behind wherever she goes while expecting everyone else to clean up after her. These weren't harmless mistakes, or the kind of poor decisions young people eventually grow out of. Every mess she created turned into a full-scale disaster, and somehow those disasters always ended up becoming my responsibility. To understand why I reacted the way I did, you need a little background. When I was 24, she took my only car without even asking me first. While driving, she decided recording a social media video was more important than paying attention to the road and slammed straight into a light pole. She called me screaming and crying, completely panicked because the police had already arrived and she had no idea what to do. Like a complete fool, I abandoned my shift at work and rushed over to rescue her. I handled the insurance company, paid the $1,200 deductible out of my own limited savings, and even absorbed the huge increase in my insurance premiums because she stood there crying, promising me she'd never make a mistake like that again. Predictably, that promise didn't last. Then there was the apartment. She begged me to co-sign her first lease because she claimed she just needed a little help getting started and couldn't qualify on her own since she had no credit history. Only 4 months later, she completely stopped paying rent so she could spend money on VIP music festival passes and expensive designer handbags. She ignored every message from the landlord, abandoned the apartment full of spoiled food, damaged walls, and complete destruction, and left me responsible for a $4,500 bill, along with the threat of an eviction showing up on my record. I spent months fighting to repair my credit while she simply moved back into our parents' house without paying them a dime and acted like the entire situation was nothing more than a harmless little mistake. The biggest problem has never been that Vanessa keeps making terrible decisions. It's that she never has to deal with the consequences. Every single time she creates another catastrophe, someone else, usually me, is expected to throw money at it until it disappears while she continues playing the victim. What makes it even worse is that she never shows the slightest appreciation afterward. Honestly, she acts as though she's entitled to a permanent safety net built entirely from my hard work and sacrifice. So when my mom called that morning to tell me Vanessa was in trouble again, I didn't feel scared. I wasn't concerned. I was exhausted, I was deeply, completely worn out from constantly being pulled into the chaos surrounding her life. I was tired of paying both financially and emotionally for every reckless, impulsive decision she made. If anything, I was surprised it had taken this long before another major disaster finally exploded. I sighed heavily before asking the question I already knew I wouldn't like the answer to. What kind of trouble? My voice was flat because I wasn't asking out of compassion. I was trying to figure out just how much damage this latest explosion was going to cause. Then my mother finally said the number. Vanessa had somehow accumulated $52,000 in debt. $52,000. I actually repeated the amount in my head because it didn't seem real. How does a 26-year-old working a part-time retail job even get approved for that much borrowed money? According to my mother, Vanessa had once again been living far beyond her means. This time, though, she hadn't just run up credit cards or fallen behind on rent. She had maxed out every credit line she could get her hands on, and after that, she made the unbelievably reckless decision to borrow money from unlicensed lenders with a very dangerous reputation. These weren't the kind of lenders who mailed polite reminders or sent friendly collection notices. These were the kind of people who showed up at your front door when payments stopped, and now they were actively looking for Vanessa. And according to my mother, there was one obvious solution to this nightmare. Me. Of course it was me. In Denise's mind, I was the responsible son with the stable tech career, the dependable sibling who always had savings, and the person everyone could rely on whenever an impossible situation needed fixing. It never crossed her mind that Vanessa was the one who had caused all of this. To her, that wasn't the real problem. The real problem was that I wasn't immediately reaching for my checkbook to rescue her once again. "You need to help your sister, Damien," she said, her voice turning firm, almost demanding, as though my position as the family's personal bank had been assigned the day I was born. I sat quietly at my kitchen island, staring into my coffee while trying to process how absurd this conversation had become. I took a slow sip, letting the bitterness bring me back to reality. "Help her how?" I asked, even though I already knew exactly what she was about to say. "You've done so well for yourself. You got that big promotion. You can just pay it off for her." She said it so casually that you would have thought she was asking me to grab a gallon of milk on my way home, instead of handing over tens of thousands of dollars. I let out a short laugh. It wasn't because anything she said was funny. My brain simply couldn't believe the level of entitlement I was hearing. Mom, I'm not the one who borrowed that money. I'm not the one who spent $52,000 on designer clothes and expensive vacations. Why would that become my responsibility? I'm not paying a single cent. The silence that followed was thick enough to feel through the phone. It sounded like she genuinely couldn't process the fact that I had refused her. She had expected the old version of me, the one who would complain, hesitate, and eventually give in like I always had when I was younger and easier to manipulate. Instead, she exploded. Without warning, she launched straight into a full guilt trip. "She's your sister, Damien. Family helps family. Do you want her to get hurt? Those people are dangerous. Is that really what you want? Do you want your little sister attacked?" Her words came fast, emotional, and dripping with blame. This wasn't a request anymore. It was an accusation. Somehow, in her version of reality, my refusal to hand over $52,000 was the real betrayal, while Vanessa choosing to borrow money from dangerous loan sharks barely deserved a mention. I gripped the edge of the counter and took a slow breath, doing everything I could to stay calm. "Mom, stop. I've helped her over and over again. I paid for her car. I repaired my credit after she destroyed it. I cleaned up the apartment disaster. Every single time I bail her out, she wastes the opportunity and goes right back to making the same terrible choices. She spends money trying to impress strangers online because she knows you'll always protect her from the consequences. I'm done. I'm not rescuing her again. She created this situation, and for once she has to deal with it herself." Reason didn't matter once my mother's favorite child was involved. "Vanessa's struggling, Damien," she shot back, her voice growing louder. "She's not like you. She's not strong enough to deal with this kind of pressure. She has anxiety." "Struggling?" I repeated, feeling my own voice rise despite trying to stay composed. "She isn't struggling, Mom. She's reckless. She's 26 years old, spends money she doesn't have, borrowed from loan sharks, and now expects me to erase $52,000 of debt with money I worked years to save. Absolutely not. She is your sister," my mother screamed into the phone. "Family takes care of each other." "No, Mom," I answered, my voice becoming calm and firm. "Family doesn't take advantage of each other. I'm not abandoning Vanessa. I'm refusing to keep enabling behavior that's been hurting everyone around her for years. She needs to grow up, accept the consequences of her choices, and finally learn to solve her own problems." My mother refused to hear any of it. Do you want her to get hurt, Damien? Do you want her blood on your conscience? How are you supposed to sleep at night if something happens to her? I rubbed my temples as a headache slowly started building behind my eyes. I'm not wishing anything bad on her. If she's genuinely afraid, she should call the police. But she knowingly borrowed money from dangerous criminals. I'm not paying them. She isn't as strong as you, my mother shouted, sounding like she was close to hyperventilating. You've always been the responsible one. She hasn't. You can afford to help her. After everything we've done for you, this is the least you owe us. That sentence hit me harder than anything else she'd said. My anger instantly boiled over. Everything you've done for me? I asked quietly. What exactly are you talking about? Making me pay rent the second I turned 19? Refusing to co-sign my student loan so I had to work 60 hours a week while going to school? Ignoring every achievement in my life because Vanessa always had another crisis? If that's your idea of support, then thanks, I guess. For a brief moment, she didn't say a word. I had actually caught her off guard, but Denise never admitted defeat. She simply looked for another weapon. When she spoke again, she went straight for what she thought was her strongest threat. If you refuse to help your sister, Damien, we'll cut you out of this family completely. You'll have no family left. I couldn't stop myself from laughing. This time, it was a real laugh, fueled entirely by disbelief. Cut me off from what, Mom? You don't support me financially. You don't support me emotionally. You don't support me mentally. I've been taking care of myself for more than 10 years. Your threats don't scare me. Do whatever you think you need to do, but my answer is still no. Without giving her another chance to argue, I pulled the phone away from my ear and ended the call. After that conversation, the family group chat went completely silent. For a little while, I honestly hoped that meant they had finally accepted my answer and were going to deal with the situation themselves. I couldn't have been more wrong. That silence wasn't surrender. It was planning. I had badly underestimated how far my mother was willing to go to protect Vanessa from facing the consequences of her own actions. Once they realized guilt wasn't going to change my mind, they abandoned the direct approach and launched a coordinated campaign designed to pressure, manipulate, and emotionally wear me down. And when I say they went all in, I mean they pulled out every manipulation tactic they could think of. It started with text messages. At first, they were simple and almost reasonable. My mom would send things like, "I just don't understand how you can be this cold." But as the days passed and she realized I wasn't responding, the messages became more dramatic, emotional, and completely detached from reality. Do you understand what kind of people Vanessa borrowed money from? These are dangerous criminals, Damien. They know where she lives. I can't sleep. I'm sick every night because I'm so scared. Oh, her life is at risk while you're sitting comfortably in your expensive apartment doing nothing. I ignored every single message. Not because I didn't care what happened to my sister, but because I no longer had the emotional energy to keep engaging with the same guilt tactics that had controlled me for years. Unfortunately, my silence only encouraged them to push harder. When the texts didn't work, my mother moved on to voice messages. And let me tell you, Denise has an almost unbelievable ability to sound like she's seconds away from completely falling apart. Damien, she sobbed in one voicemail, taking dramatic pauses between every word. Vanessa might not survive this if you don't send the money today. I don't know what I'll do if something happens to my baby girl. Please, I'm begging you. I'm literally begging you. It was guilt tripping at its absolute highest level. Then my dad, Gerald, decided it was his turn. Normally, my father is more of a quiet enabler. He's the type of person who stands in the background, avoids conflict, and lets my mother control the situation. But this time, he actually got involved. His voicemail started off calm. "Hey, Damien, just checking in, son. I wanted to talk to you for a minute." For a moment, I thought maybe he was going to be reasonable. Then came the shift. "Look, I know your mom can be intense sometimes, and I know you and Vanessa have had problems, but this situation is serious. She is in deep trouble, and we simply don't have the money to fix this ourselves. We can't handle this without you." Then he used the line I had heard my entire life. "You've always been the strong one, the dependable one. You're the person this family can count on. Don't let us down now, son." That phrase, the dependable one, made my blood boil. Because I had spent my entire adult life being the dependable one. And what did that get me? An endless list of responsibilities, almost no appreciation, and a family that treated me like a resource instead of a person. Being reliable does not mean I'm obligated to sacrifice myself every time someone else makes a reckless decision. Being dependable does not mean I'm a doormat. But apparently nobody in my family understood that difference. And they weren't finished. When my parents realized emotional pressure wasn't working, they called in reinforcements. The extended family. Out of nowhere, my phone started lighting up with calls from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. People who couldn't remember to send a birthday message suddenly wanted to lecture me about family loyalty. My Uncle Frank was one of the first. This was the same man who couldn't even send me a congratulations text when I graduated college, but now he was calling like we were lifelong friends. "Hey, Damien. Long time no talk, buddy. How's the city treating you?" I already knew exactly why he was calling, but I decided to let him continue for a little while. "You know, Damien, family is the most important thing in the world," he said, using that overly serious and almost condescending tone people use right before asking for something completely unreasonable. "And your sister is going through a really difficult time right now. Everyone makes mistakes when they're young. Sometimes people just need their big brother to step up and show a little compassion." "Frank, let me stop you right there," I interrupted calmly. "Did Denise ask you to call me?" He gave an uncomfortable little laugh. "Well, she might have mentioned that things were a little tense. I'm not paying Vanessa's $52,000 debt to loan sharks, Frank. It's not my responsibility. And if you feel so strongly that family should help, why don't you take out a mortgage on your house and pay it yourself?" I ended the call before he could come up with an answer. The following day, it was my Aunt Diane. After that, it was my cousin Natalie. Every single one of them had been given the same story. Vanessa was the helpless victim. Vanessa needed saving. And I was apparently the greedy, heartless brother who had money but refused to help while his sister was supposedly in danger. It was unbelievably frustrating. Not one of them wanted to acknowledge the reality. They didn't care that Vanessa was a grown adult who had spent money she didn't have, chased a lifestyle she couldn't afford, and made decisions that put her in this situation. When I tried explaining that I wasn't going to destroy my own financial future because of someone else's irresponsible choices, they looked at me like I was speaking another language. "But she's your sister." That was all they repeated, as if those 4 words were some magical phrase that erased years of manipulation, financial problems, and being forced to clean up her mistakes. But the worst part wasn't even the phone calls. It was the smear campaign. When my mother realized I wasn't going to break, she decided to completely rewrite the story and turn the entire extended family against me. She went onto Facebook and started posting in the huge family WhatsApp group I had left years earlier, painting me as some arrogant, selfish tech guy who had forgotten where he came from. According to her version of events, I was a terrible person who cared more about my expensive city lifestyle than my own family. She made it sound like I was perfectly comfortable watching my sister suffer while I sat in luxury and did nothing. I only discovered what she was saying because my cousin Derek, one of the few reasonable people left in my family, called me to warn me. "Dude," Derek said, sounding completely exhausted, "Denise is saying horrible things about you to everyone. She told Aunt Diane that you laughed and said you hoped Vanessa got hurt so she'd finally learn a lesson." I was furious. Not because I cared what Aunt Diane thought about me, but because my own mother was inventing cruel lies to make herself look like the victim while turning me into the villain. I told Derek exactly what happened. I never said anything remotely close to that. All I had told them was that Vanessa needed to contact the police and deal with the situation properly. Derek sighed. "Yeah, I figured she was exaggerating. You've always been the reasonable one. And honestly, it's just a huge mess. Stay away from it, man." But the biggest explosion came when Vanessa finally decided to speak. Until that moment, she had been completely silent. Not one text, not one phone call. Nothing. I honestly assumed she was embarrassed and didn't know how to face me after everything. But I was wrong. She wasn't ashamed. She was angry because her usual methods weren't working and she had simply been waiting for the right moment to attack. Late one night, my phone buzzed with a message from her. I expected a desperate request for help. Instead, I got pure anger. "Damien, I honestly cannot believe how selfish you're being right now. You know I'm in serious danger and you're just sitting in your luxury apartment doing absolutely nothing. You have the money. You're supposed to be my brother. You're dead to me." Selfish. The irony of hearing that word from Vanessa was almost unbelievable. Her entire life had been a pattern of selfish choices, leaving behind a trail of problems that somehow always ended up becoming mine to fix. I didn't answer her message. I just stared at my phone screen, feeling something inside me go completely numb. For the first time, I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt. I was just done. The next morning, she tried a completely different approach. Instead of apologizing, she doubled down on her ridiculous logic. "Damien, look, stop acting like this is some huge, impossible situation. You have $52,000 sitting there. Just pay these people off so they stop bothering me. I'll pay you back every month once I get a better job. Don't be such a jerk about this." She said it like handing over $52,000 to unlicensed criminals was some normal, everyday favor. Like it was no different from covering someone's dinner or helping with a small bill. And the funniest part was her promise to pay me back. How was I supposed to believe that when she couldn't even handle an $1,100 rent payment without walking away from it? I didn't respond. I had nothing left to say. Of course, my silence only made things worse. She sent another massive wall of text, a long emotional rant about how I was abandoning her, how I had always secretly been jealous of her, and how I could never understand what it felt like to struggle with mental health issues. Then, just to make sure she caused as much damage as possible, she sent one final message. Mom and Dad always told me you would eventually come around because you can't stand when people are angry with you. I guess they were wrong. You really are a sociopath. That message didn't hurt me. It actually did something else. It made everything crystal clear. This wasn't just Vanessa being selfish or irresponsible. My parents had been feeding this mindset for years. They had convinced her that I would always be there to rescue her, that I would never truly say no, and that my money was somehow a family resource she had unlimited access to. They had trained her to see me as her backup plan. And I was finally done. I muted her notifications, turned on Do Not Disturb, and went to bed. I thought that after the guilt trips, the emotional attacks, the relatives being sent after me, and the public smear campaign, they had already crossed every possible line. I was wrong. I had severely underestimated how far my family was willing to go. They had used every emotional weapon they had, but apparently they still had one final move left. And this time, it wasn't just cruel. It was illegal. Update 1. It happened on a Thursday afternoon. I was sitting at my desk, completely focused on a complicated data analysis spreadsheet, when my phone started ringing. The caller ID showed my bank. At first, I assumed it was just a standard fraud verification call about a recent online purchase. Nothing unusual. So I answered normally. Hello? Is this Damien last name? The person on the other end asked. The voice belonged to someone from the bank's Central Fraud Prevention Department. Yes, this is Damien. Mr. Last Name, we're contacting you because we detected highly suspicious activity involving your primary savings account. My attention immediately shifted. The representative continued. Earlier today, someone attempted to access your account through both the phone system and online banking portal using forged documents that do not match our records. They attempted to change the primary email address, update the phone number connected to the account, and authorize a large wire transfer. I sat there frozen. Our automated security systems flagged the activity because of the unusual IP address, the document inconsistencies, and the sudden changes being requested. We have temporarily locked the account to prevent any unauthorized movement of funds. I felt all the blood leave my face. My heart started pounding so hard it felt like it was hitting against my ribs. A wire transfer for how much? I asked quietly. The attempted transfer amount was $52,000, sir. $52,000. Exactly the amount Vanessa owed. The bank representative continued. We cannot provide specific location information over the phone, but based on the security questions attempted and the personal information used, it appears the person involved had significant knowledge of your background. Do you have any idea who could have done this? I didn't need time to think. I didn't need to investigate. I already knew. The amount, the timing, the personal security questions. My first pet, my mother's maiden name. The street where I grew up. It was Vanessa. When I refused to give her money, she decided to steal it instead. She had attempted to steal my identity, forge documents, and drain my savings account to pay off the dangerous people she borrowed from. I felt a level of anger I had never experienced before. Not normal frustration. Not disappointment. Pure, burning rage. Because this wasn't a desperate mistake. This was calculated. This was intentional. This was a serious felony. I thanked the bank representative, instructed them to keep my account completely locked down, and ended the call. I didn't sit there and think about what to do next. I didn't debate whether I was overreacting. I grabbed my keys, walked out of my office, and drove straight across the city to Vanessa's apartment. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My jaw was clenched so hard it hurt. I wasn't going there to argue. I wasn't going there to negotiate. I was finished being the calm, reasonable brother who always gave everyone another chance. When I reached her apartment, I walked straight to her door and slammed my fist against it. A minute later, the door opened. Vanessa stood there wearing a silk robe, holding a green smoothie, looking completely relaxed. She looked like someone who had absolutely no idea she had just committed a crime. "What the hell are you doing here?" she snapped, rolling her eyes. "You tried to steal from me," I said. My voice was low and controlled. Straight to the point. For a split second, her expression changed. There was a flash of panic. A tiny moment where I could tell she knew exactly what I was talking about. But just as quickly, she covered it with anger. "I have no idea what you're talking about, Damien. Are you seriously accusing me of something right now? The confidence was unbelievable. Don't even pretend you don't know, I said, stepping closer. The bank's fraud department called me. They caught what you did. Someone used fake documents, answered my security questions, and tried transferring exactly $52,000 from my savings account. I stared directly at her. Do you understand how serious this is? Identity theft and wire fraud can put someone in prison. Vanessa let out a dramatic sigh, like I was a child throwing a fit over something meaningless. Oh my God, relax, Damien. You're being so dramatic. The transfer didn't even go through. I didn't actually get the money. I just stared at her. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She wasn't denying it. She wasn't apologizing. She was defending herself by saying she failed. Relax? I asked. Are you seriously trying to justify committing a federal crime because you weren't successful? You tried to empty my savings account, Vanessa. That's a felony. She simply shrugged and took another sip of her smoothie. What else was I supposed to do, Damien? You left me with no choice. Those people sent me a picture of my front door this morning. You refused to help me when my life was in danger. You forced me into this. I felt sick hearing those words. No choice? I stared at her in disbelief. You had every choice in the world. You could have stopped spending money you didn't have. You could have gone to the police. You could have filed for bankruptcy. You had options. I pointed at her. But instead, you decided stealing money I worked years for was easier because you're entitled and too lazy to deal with the consequences of your own actions. Her face immediately turned bright red with anger. Don't act like you're better than me, she snapped. Mom and Dad told me you would never actually let me fail. They said you'd eventually come around if I pushed hard enough. They told me I just needed to wait until you got over your little tantrum and remembered that family comes first. I stood there in the hallway completely frozen, trying to process the unbelievable level of betrayal that had just been revealed. Little tantrum? Those two words changed something inside me. This wasn't just anger anymore. It wasn't frustration. It was something much deeper. This was the realization that everything I had been dealing with for years was not random. This was the result of nearly 3 decades of my parents protecting Vanessa from every consequence, constantly feeding her the belief that the world owed her something, and treating me like the person who was supposed to sacrifice himself every time she made another mistake. I was supposed to be the family sacrifice, the person thrown into the fire so Vanessa could walk away untouched. Unbelievable, I muttered, slowly shaking my head. Do you even understand what you did today, Vanessa? Do you understand what you just destroyed? I looked directly at her. You didn't just cross a boundary. You burned the entire bridge between us. Instead of showing regret, she simply rolled her eyes. She didn't understand. Or maybe she just refused to. Her arrogance completely protected her from reality. I'm not the bad guy here, Damien. You are, she said. You turned your back on your own family. If you had just sent the money like a good brother was supposed to, none of this would have happened. That was the moment, the absolute final straw. I closed my eyes and took a slow, shaky breath. Not because I was trying to stay calm for her, because I was trying to stop myself from yelling so loudly that someone in the building would call the police. I'm done, I said. My voice was surprisingly calm. I turned around and started walking away. But before I reached the stairs, I stopped. I looked back over my shoulder and locked eyes with her. If you ever, and I mean ever, try to access my accounts again, contact my employer, or come anywhere near me after this, I will not hesitate. I paused. I won't call Mom. I won't call Dad. I will call the police. I will give them the bank's fraud report, the evidence, and everything they need. And I will make sure you face the consequences of what you did. My voice became colder. Grow up, Vanessa. You're on your own. I didn't stay to hear her response. I walked outside into the cool afternoon air, got into my car, and drove away. My thoughts were racing. How had my family become this unhealthy? How had they convinced themselves that what they were doing was acceptable? How could they possibly justify protecting someone who tried to steal from me? Deep down, I already knew the truth. There was no coming back from this. Attempted grand larceny wasn't something you simply apologized for and moved past. The relationship was permanently broken. I needed to cut ties completely. But I also knew my parents. They weren't going to accept losing control over me without a fight. And unfortunately, I was right. The very next day, the next battle arrived at my doorstep. I took the day off work so I could handle everything properly. I contacted my bank, changed every password I had, froze my credit with all 3 major credit bureaus, and added 2-factor authentication to everything I could think of. My email, my accounts, even things as simple as my gym membership. I wasn't taking any chances anymore. When I returned home from the bank, I immediately noticed something waiting for me. My parents' silver SUV was parked directly in front of my garage. I wasn't surprised. Annoyed? Absolutely. But surprised? Not at all. I knew they weren't going to quietly accept my silence. I parked on the street, sat there for a moment, took a deep breath, and prepared myself for what was coming. This was no longer a conversation. This was a battle. My mother was standing on my front porch with her arms crossed, her face twisted into an angry expression. My father stood several feet behind her, staring down at the ground. He looked uncomfortable, almost like someone who wanted no part in what was happening, but didn't have the courage to stop it. "Damien?" My mother snapped the second I stepped onto the driveway. "We need to talk right now." "I don't think we do, Denise," I replied. I intentionally used her first name. I wanted her to understand that I was no longer the obedient son who would sit there and accept whatever she demanded. Everything that needed to be said was already said yesterday. She looked genuinely shocked by the disrespect. Her eyes widened for a moment, but she quickly recovered. "This has gone on long enough. We are your parents. Vanessa's your sister. You threatened to call the police on her. This is not how a family behaves." I walked right past her, unlocked my front door, and stepped inside. "I'm not having this conversation outside where the entire neighborhood can hear," I said without turning around. "If you're going to yell at me, you can do it inside." They followed me. My father walked behind my mother quietly, almost like he was afraid to disagree with her. The second the door closed behind us, she started. "Damien, you need to stop this stubborn, arrogant behavior immediately. Vanessa called me yesterday completely hysterical. She was terrified. She made a small mistake trying to access the money because she was desperate. And instead of understanding that, you threatened to destroy her life." She pointed at me. "As her older brother, it is your responsibility to protect her." I stared at her. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "A small mistake, Mom?" My voice was flat. "She committed identity theft. She attempted wire fraud. She tried to steal $52,000 from my account." I stepped closer. "Let me explain something about family. Family doesn't forge documents. Family doesn't lie, manipulate, and steal when they don't get what they want." I shook my head. Family also doesn't expect one person to sacrifice their entire life savings while the favorite child continues making reckless decisions without consequences. I looked directly at her. "So don't stand in my house and lecture me about family." Finally, my dad spoke. He stepped forward with his hands slightly raised, trying to calm everyone down. "Damien, please, this isn't about choosing sides or blaming anyone. It's about solving a serious problem. You're the only person who has the resources to make this disappear." I let out a bitter laugh. The sound echoed through the quiet room. "Solve it?" I looked at him. "You mean you want me to pay criminals, ignore a federal crime, and pretend this never happened so she can repeat the exact same thing 6 months from now?" I shook my head. "No, absolutely not. I'm done fixing problems that I didn't create." "She is your sister," my mother screamed. Her face turned bright red with anger. "Do you understand what those people could do to her if they don't get their money? How will you live with yourself if she ends up in the hospital?" That was when I finally lost control. "How will I live with myself?" My voice exploded through the room. "How do you two live with yourselves?" I pointed at both of them. "You spent her entire life protecting her from reality. Every mistake, every failure, every disaster, you made excuses. You rescued her every time. And whenever it was convenient, you pushed me aside and expected me to deal with the consequences." I stared at my mother. "You created this situation, Denise. You helped create this version of Vanessa." My voice hardened. "So don't you dare stand here and try to make me feel guilty because I refuse to clean up the disaster you created?" My mother looked at me like I'd physically hurt her. For a moment, she couldn't even speak. Then her expression changed. The sadness disappeared. What replaced it was pure anger. "If you refuse to write that check today, Damien, then we have no choice." She stared directly at me. "We are cutting you off completely." She paused. "No holidays, no birthdays. You won't be welcome in our home anymore." Her voice became cold. "You will be dead to us." I stared at her and suddenly a strange sense of calm came over me. Not anger, not sadness, just calm. I looked at the woman who had given birth to me, and for the first time in my life, I realized I felt absolutely nothing. "Mom," I said quietly, "I have been taking care of myself since I was a teenager. I've been independent for years. You cutting me off is like firing an employee who quit 12 years ago. It doesn't mean anything to me." She opened her mouth, ready to start yelling again. But before she could, my dad grabbed her arm. Denise, stop. This isn't working. For once, he actually sounded like he understood that they were losing control of the situation. He looked at me with a desperate expression. Damien, can't you just meet us halfway? Give her $22,000, at least enough to buy some time and get these people off her back. I stared at him in disbelief. Halfway? I let out a bitter laugh. You want me to hand over $22,000 for a crime I didn't commit? What exactly is Vanessa contributing to this so-called compromise? I looked between them. Nothing. I pointed toward the door. Get out. My mother blinked, completely shocked. Excuse me? Get out. I pointed toward the front entrance. This conversation is over. You are not going to threaten me, pressure me, or manipulate me inside my own home. Leave and do not ever come back here. My father gently grabbed my mother's arm and guided her toward the door. As she walked past me, she stopped. She looked up at me with pure hatred in her eyes. You will regret this, Damien. Remember my words. You are going to pay for this. I didn't answer. I simply closed the door behind them and locked the deadbolt. For the first time in what felt like forever, my house was quiet. Finally. Peaceful. But deep down, I knew the peace probably wouldn't last. It never did with my family. Update 2. Update. A full week went by without hearing anything from them. And honestly, I started thinking, maybe the worst was finally over. Maybe they had accepted that I wasn't changing my mind. Maybe they were finally dealing with Vanessa's problems themselves. I was wrong. One Tuesday evening after work, I came home and checked my mailbox. Inside was a thick, certified envelope from a law firm I didn't recognize. My heart immediately dropped. I opened it and started reading. Within seconds, my jaw hit the floor. My parents had actually hired a lawyer. The letter was a formal legal threat claiming that I had a moral and implied legal responsibility to financially support my dependent sister. They referenced vague and completely misunderstood ideas about family obligations and even accused me of intentionally causing emotional distress by refusing to help. Their demand was simple. They wanted me to immediately transfer $52,000 into an escrow account. If I refused, they threatened to take me to civil court and sue me for damages. I stood in my kitchen holding that piece of paper, completely stunned. My parents were actually willing to sue their own son in order to protect the daughter who had just tried to steal from him. It was so ridiculous, so completely disconnected from reality, that I actually started laughing. Not a normal laugh. A shocked, almost unbelievable laugh. Because at that moment, I realized something. They weren't acting like a family anymore. They had turned this into a war. But instead of panicking, I simply picked up my phone and called my lawyer. His name was Richard, and he had helped me with some real estate contracts a few years earlier. He also happened to have a great sense of humor. I emailed him a copy of the letter and waited. When he called me back, he was already laughing. Damien, did you actually read this nonsense? Yeah, I said. Are they serious? They might be serious, Richard replied, still amused. But their lawyer is either completely incompetent or just happy to collect their retainer. He continued. They don't have a case. A moral obligation isn't a legal contract. You cannot be sued because you refuse to pay someone else's illegal debt. If they actually file this lawsuit, a judge will throw it out immediately, and their attorney could face consequences for submitting something this ridiculous. Do you want me to send a cease and desist letter? Yes, I answered immediately. Make it as aggressive as you legally can. Tell them that if they contact me again, I will file a police report about Vanessa's attempted wire fraud, and I will pursue legal action against them for harassment. Richard sent the letter the next morning, and just like that, everything went silent. Apparently, the idea of me actually giving the police the bank's fraud evidence was enough to make them reconsider their strategy. I never heard another word from their ridiculous lawyer. That was the final piece of closure I needed. Knowing they were willing to drag me into court over this proved that there was no relationship left to save. I couldn't keep that door open anymore. Not even slightly. I blocked my parents' numbers. I blocked Vanessa. I blocked every aunt, uncle, and cousin who had attacked me or sent hateful messages. I secured my social media accounts. I disappeared from their lives completely. Before fully cutting everyone off, I called Derek one final time. He was one of the only people in my family who had actually been reasonable. Dude, Derek said after I explained everything about the lawsuit and the bank fraud. That is insane. They seriously tried to sue you and steal from you? Yeah, I replied. I'm done, Derek. I'm going completely no contact. I just wanted you to know the truth before Denise starts telling everyone another fake version of what happened. I've got your back, man, he said. Honestly, good for you. They're toxic. I'll let you know if anything crazy happens. But other than that, enjoy your peace. And peace was exactly what I found. Months passed, and the longer I stayed away from the constant family chaos, the more I realized how much of my life had been consumed by their problems. My anxiety dropped. I started sleeping better. I became happier. I even earned another promotion at work. For the first time in years, I was building a life that wasn't constantly interrupted by someone else's disaster. Eventually, Derek called me with an update. I could tell from his voice that he had something to say. "Hey man, I thought you should know," he said. "It finally happened." I immediately knew what he meant. The loan sharks caught up with Vanessa. My stomach tightened for a second. Is she okay? Some small part of me, that old brotherly instinct, still reacted. Yeah, she's physically okay, but they found her in the parking lot of her apartment complex. He paused. They destroyed her car, smashed every window, slashed the tires, scratched up the entire body. They even left a note on the dashboard saying next time they wouldn't just go after the car. I sat quietly. Wow, I finally said. What happened after that? She completely broke down. The police got involved. From what I heard, Denise and Gerald had to take out a massive second mortgage on their house with a terrible interest rate just to pay those people off and stop things from getting worse. He continued. Vanessa has a repossession on her record now. She filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. And your parents are drowning financially because of that second mortgage. I sat on my couch processing everything. I thought maybe I would feel guilty. Maybe I would feel sorry for my parents struggling financially in their 50s. But I didn't. All I felt was a deep sense of justice. Because they made their choices. They chose to protect Vanessa. They chose to excuse her behavior. They chose to shield her from consequences for 26 years. And eventually the consequences arrived anyway. Thanks for telling me, Derek, I said quietly. But honestly, I don't care anymore. And I meant it. Cutting them off was one of the hardest things I've ever done. It hurts realizing that the people who are supposed to love you sometimes only value what you can provide for them. But walking away saved me. It saved my mental health. It saved my future. I refuse to be a puppet controlled by their expectations anymore. Now I'm focused on my career, my friends who have become my real family, and creating a life that belongs to me. If there's one lesson I learned from this entire nightmare, it's this. Toxic people will drag you underwater if you keep letting them hold on to you, even if they share your blood. Sometimes the only way to survive is to let them sink on their own.